All right, before we begin, let me do my wonderful audio testing that always occurs right at the start. All right, good. So the title is derived from a tweet that Trump sent out a couple of hours ago. Just like apparently taking some news headline uh, and posting it with the same quotation marks. And I've actually, as a pattern, engaged in an activity where I'll go to one of his tweets, especially the ones where I find the writing to be the weirdest, kind of like really cryptic, basically, right? And I'll make that the title of the stream in which I discuss it to basically link the two, put the video with the tweet, even if the video obviously will be seen by a much smaller and lesser amount of people, but you get the idea that it's done purposely for that kind of, intent. So a lot of times I try to explain to people that as someone who doesn't like very many contemporary politicians, I still can admit when one of them or two or three do something or some things that I like. And I have spoken with great consistency about my appreciation for the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I just thought it was the most effective way to at least somewhat forward the U.S. Iran relationship, which has been kind of tumultuous for decades, going all the way back to the Iran-Iraq war, where the U.S. was on the side of Iraq. Just stuff like that. With Khomeini and Rahala and the rest of that. So let me say hello to Elliot. But yeah, it was this really nice agreement that was, again, as I think as good as it could have possibly been. And it was organized and manufactured by an administration, the Obama tenure, that again I'm not a fan of, but that was a really great deal that was quickly turned into cannon fodder by Republicans. And it pisses me off because again, I don't have many things I'll defend Obama on. I don't defend him on Obamacare. I don't defend him on what was that stupid law? The NDAA 1021, and which is part of the whole prosecuting journalists thing that I've talked about before, where people like to sit here and go, "Oh my God, Trump is going to nail journalists," but then Obama used the Espionage Act 6 times to jail journalists. So it's all that kind of stuff I would never defend him on. But it feels like the very few things he did that I like, they still get screwed with. Whether it's this, whether it's the Paris Agreement, whether it's restoring relations with Cuba, you can go down the list. But it seems like any kind of national or international issue that doesn't rely on bombing or blowing people's brains out indiscriminately, Trump's tenure has been completely about, axing, just get rid of it. Again, as long as it's in the pursuit of not having some kind of armed conflict. Now, if it's, the genocide in Yemen, for example, that the Obama administration started, which is, my biggest issue with that tenure, Trump keeps it going. If it's getting out of Iraq and then going back 3 years later and being stuck there ever since, not only does Trump keep it going, but he decides to have an indefinite occupation. Syria says he's getting out after Obama was the one who got in, decides to stay in anyway. We can go down the list. The bootlicking for Saudi Arabia, the bootlicking for Israel. Well, Obama didn't bootlick for Israel as much, but the point is that any kind of continuation of these weird alliances, like the one between the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia, or bombing a bunch of countries for no reason, it just seems like Trump has no problem continuing that from his immediate predecessor. But if there's a deal that involves not having a physical altercation, tear it to shreds, rip it up, just throw it away. And I just gave a bunch of examples. And I've, when I look at some of the comments his supporters write online in defense of him, it's all the same. Like, they'll be the first ones to tell you that they think Iran is going to do something to the U.S. when we've been out of the deal for over a year now. And to my knowledge, they haven't bombed us. To my knowledge, they haven't committed any acts of domestic terrorism. Only acts of domestic terrorism over here are those school shootings that are orchestrated by American-born people. America-born people, or people that are from here. You get the idea. So when I'm over here reading this tweet and looking at the stuff underneath it, the people going, "Oh my God, we have to get Iran, and we need to stop them from from using their weapons of mass destruction." Well, the deal that the president that you love so much pulled out of, that was organized by the one before him, allowed us to do inspections of their nuclear test sites. And I'm forgetting the agency's name, but they would go in there and they would look at the current progress of the arsenal, and they would say, "Hey, this is not cool," or give some kind of update. It was a very tra- um, transparent, way of dealing with each other. And I really feel like you guys have no leg to stand on, because see, one of the things that the U.S. likes to do, this isn't just Trump, it's any of the presidents. When they pull out of an agreement, they try to tell you it's outdated, or because they'll say, "Oh, well, we didn't know this at the time," or they'll try to get you to think that the other country is the reason why stuff went astray. They'll say, "Oh, they did this. They're responsible for inflicting such a thing upon us." So when you look at the Iran relationship, they're going to be the first ones to tell you Iran's been doing all these horrible things, but they can't answer why all the other countries that signed on to that agreement back in 2015 are still in it, except us. They'll be the first ones to tell you the Paris Agreement was such a bad idea, but they won't be able to tell you why every single country except us and two other ones, Nicaragua and I think Saudi Arabia, are the only ones who aren't in it. They'll be the first ones to tell you, "Oh, Russia violated the INF Treaty," but then they can't explain why they decided to pull out first. So it's all of it is them being hypocritical, and like I said, it's all in the pursuit of that stupid national security advisor Bolton. The guy wants to have conflicts and wars, new wars, right? Not the seven that we've carried over from the Obama tenure, in Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela. And look at the tensions that we've had with those three countries since not since Trump took over, since Bolton took over. We had this peace summit, right, last year with North Korea, that Bolton tried to sabotage. We had the second one that was this year, that he tried, that literally accomplished nothing, that he tried to go, "Oh, well, it wasn't too bad." Um, Venezuela, goes around talking about Maduro so horrible and evil. Like you can just look at what's happened since, I think it was April of last year, and you can kind of, the timeline speaks for itself. Hell, like a week after the guy entered office, we were already bombing, Syria, or sent them that missile strike. Um, I just don't understand the weird, insatiable desire for a lot of America. Because I've really noticed, especially in recent years, after like kind of reflecting on my interactions and watching some of the stuff that these quote unquote conservatives like. A lot of Republicans are not pro-war. The problem is a lot of the Trump supporters that identify as being libertarian or whatever, they have this weird thing where like whatever he says, they completely agree with, and they won't show any sign of dissent on. Um, and it really it goes to like why. So there was a person who said the politicians are actually, and I guess I'll end the stream now because we have a zero audience right now at this point, but there was an individual who said that the politicians are a symptom of the people. So if you have a problem with the politicians, you can take it to the people. And so, as an example, I'm using my own example. If Republicans in Congress 99% of the time collectively vote with Trump, then it's no surprise that Trump supporters 99% of the time agree with Trump. If Democrats are able to take, money from all kind of corporations and different corrupt groups, uh, just like Republicans, and vote the same, and then still have, people saying that they're different, then their ability to grandstand and pretend like they're actually making a difference makes all the more sense when you realize the people who are backing them up don't even know anything about them. Like all these people that are going around talking about, the hells of pulling out of disagreements and whatnot. And this is again me trying to be fair. I don't see them on their Twitter accounts getting pissed because the guy before Trump had all these different conflicts in these other countries. I don't see them saying, "I wish that the current president, as crappy as he is, would end these different wars and whatnot that've been going on for in one case almost 20 years." They don't do that because every single thing that goes on any of these websites, right? Whether it's YouTube or Twitter, especially Twitter, that's the sewer system, is all about the pursuit of trying to make, trying to form this narrative that everything was perfect 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago, whatever the hell, and everything since then has been so awful and horrible and dire and aggravating and whatnot. And it's all meant to obfuscate from the fact that these problems have been going on for a very long time. And you actually have seen multiple people who go on these different websites and they pose the question of, hey, how come you're mad at Trump for stoking up conflict with Iran, but you're not mad at any of his predecessors for, having conflict with them as well? Because prior to the nuclear deal, Obama had conflict with him. Bush had conflict with Iran. I think Clinton actually was the originator of just direct conflict, because I think he was the first one who called them a terrorist sponsor or something. I have to go review my own video. But my point is that, they would never go after the other ones for specifically screwing up in some area of international issues. But now, because they want to peddle stuff against Trump, I'm so concerned, and I'd like a thorough examination of his foreign policy. They don't care about any of this stuff. Like all those idiots writing stuff to him on Twitter, whether they like him or not, are all playing the same game of trying to feel better about themselves by talking about this really corrupt person. We don't need a lecture or somebody writing 7 or 8 tweets about how stupid Trump is to get the picture. The problem is we have a lot of people who cannot go after him for things that are worth being gone after for. Like, I don't, I've seen so many different posts on social media or commentators or on CNN or whatever other network where they talk about his tweets, they talk about the reelection strategy. I'm like, man, who cares? I don't look whether he gets reelected next year or not. I'm not going to talk about that every single day and then act like he's not being aggressive with Iran. So before we close this out, I'm going to give you some highlights of the relationship between the U.S. and Iran over the last two years, just since Trump's been in office. So a couple of days after he took office, he put Iran on notice after they had some ballistic missile tests. And they imposed sanctions on 25 Iranian individuals and entities. Let's see here. I actually forgot. I think I might have remembered hearing about that, but not really. Don't quote me on it. This is another significant one. He designated Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as a foreign terrorist group. So that was another big deal because if you keep people really, they don't get stuff, whatever. Oh, and then now they have a record of the other stuff. Oh, this is the group's name, the International Atomic Energy Agency. So they're the ones who actually, under that nuclear deal, would go and check out if Iran was doing their test. I forgot to mention their name earlier because I didn't remember. So sue me. So they certified that Iran was abiding by the deal, and this was 2 weeks ago. It was May 28th. Not that long ago. Certified that, and then they also questions were raised about how many advanced centrifuges Iran was allowed to have, as that was only loosely defined in the deal. So it wasn't perfect. Let's see. What is this? But yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was still ideally something that actually, tried to make some kind of difference, as opposed to what's going on now, where it's a war of words and people are trying to trash talk each other and have a continuous conflict that goes nowhere. I'd probably say that it's the best outcome we can get is maybe just another year of them going back and forth because the missile dropping is only continuous in countries we're already involved in. So Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, somewhere I'm forgetting Iraq. Places like that. You're going to be seeing bombs drop for another 10 or so years based on the all the warmongers in Washington. But in the case of Iran, we actually don't. I really couldn't give a timetable for it. I think that if Trump gets reelected or not doesn't have a bearing on it because we're still a year away from that. But just in the last year, the war of words, it's really similar to North Korea where they say things to each other, but no one's willing to kind of strike, because they don't want to get blamed for the conflict. So the best outcome is just we stay in this little bubble, that continuous streak of nothing happening, and that's preferable to actually seeing somebody die over this. I can't wait to watch more speeches from American politicians about the evils of Iran not having a direct, what do you call it, an elective government because they have a supreme leader. It's like you guys support all kind of. You're saying that like you don't back Saudi Arabia in spite of them not having one. But again, more grandstanding and more ways to demonize whatever country that you have a problem with the leadership of. They just pick a reason to start being crybabies and whining about all kind of things that are not consequential. Like, oh yeah, it was fine for them to abide by this agreement, but only if they have an elective government. We can't just be happy that they're abiding by something that says you can't attack us, we can't attack you, and this agency is going to make sure that doesn't happen. No, we have to whine about the structure of your government as well. We have to support Iraq when it attacks you in a war that goes on for almost a decade. And then we have our president call you a terrorist sponsor, and but then we get surprised when you when you don't like us for decades. I bet you could poll Americans and ask them to define the U.S. Iran relationship past 2 years ago, and I'd wager that 98% couldn't tell you a single thing about the U.S. Iran relationship other than the Iran nuclear deal and Trump pulled out of it. They wouldn't be able to tell you about the Golan Heights, or not the Golan Heights. Excuse me, that's Israel. About the group that was characterized as the corps, the one that was characterized as a terrorist group. So people don't pay attention to this stuff. And really, what's so disturbing is that because of this refusal to be concerned, really, no matter what happens, because even if we send troops over there, unless you're related to one of the troops, you're not going to give a damn if a couple of, dozens or hundreds of American citizens get blown to pieces fighting some conflict they didn't start. Doesn't matter to you. But it's really creepy because it basically means the only way you get people to be concerned is if Iran literally just starts dropping bombs on people's houses. So they're gonna have their time. I hope the U.S. doesn't. I don't know. Like even getting a leadership change might still have this screwed up because like I'm watching the conflict over in Israel with just kind of like the way U.S. politicians react, and I'm like, you guys really are so bent out of shape over Omar's comments that you're gonna call her anti-Semitic. It's like really, you're that much in love with Israel. You're that to where if anyone's saying about the government, they're anti-Semitic. But then when I see that, I become convinced that like it's no wonder why the U.S. is fear mongering about Iran. Iran is the arch nemesis of Israel. At least the governments are. So if you're so far up the behind of one, then you're going to be pissed off at the other. It's really creepy. Like I almost like I would sometimes I want to just picture the U.S. Israel relationship, and it's like if you took a what's a good example? I'd say if NSFW stuff was allowed on here, I would draw like the U.S. map, right? Its head on a female body, and then Israel's head on the male body, and behind it sticking its you know what in the U.S.'s back, and then the U.S. has like a frown or is angry as it's staring at Iran, which is just like casually dressed, walking down the street while this weird sexual thing is going on with the U.S. and Israel, where the joke is that Iran is just minding its own business, leaving people alone, and because the U.S. is being, so coerced into getting pissed off with Iran by Israel, it's going to just be upset no matter what Iran does. So, look, thank you for attending. Have a good day.